Africa and the rest of the global south are experiencing extreme devastating climate change effects such as extreme heat waves, drought, floods, and outbreak of diseases, among others. And I'm sure most of you have actually experienced or are experiencing this from wherever you are. This has forced millions of people in Africa and other parts of the developing South into dependency syndrome, whereby their lives are dependent on relief foods and medicines provided by relief agencies. From Pakistan to Haiti to Nigeria to the Horn of Africa, the story is the same. In this briefing, Dr. Sheila Ochugboju will outline how science and scientific solutions are helping humanity to meet the current challenges causing today's world to be riddled with fragilities such as pandemics, and COVID is just still with us, droughts, floods, malnutrition, and fake news, among others. Applications of science, technology, and innovations, especially in the global south, will lead to the shift from relief to resilience by enabling the most vulnerable people to live healthier lives, grow more food that are nutritious, adapt to climate change, and have the information they need to make more informed decisions on their lives and livelihoods. And to speak to us about this today is Dr. Sheila, as I have mentioned. Sheila Ochugboju is the Executive Director of the Alliance for Science, a global initiative dedicated to the promotion of science and evidence-based policies on agribiotech, health and climate change, and misinformation. She has vast experience in these fields, having worked for over 15 years with various international organizations, including the UNDP, UNEP, UN Habitat, and the African Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Africa CDC, that is in Africa, Asia, America, and Europe, more or less all over the globe. She trained as a research scientist with a PhD in biochemistry from London University, followed by a postdoctoral research fellowship at the University of Oxford, focused on genetically modified viruses. I think we are in a good hands. So Dr. Sheila, the platform is yours. Please address. These are journalists from different parts of African countries, Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, and others that I can't tell by just looking at the names, but majority are actually from Kenya. But this information will go to all over the world, especially in the sub-Saharan Africa. Thank you very much for agreeing to talk to us on this important subject.
Wow, thank you so much for inviting me. I am so incredibly privileged to be talking to such a vast group of Pan-African journalists. You're so important to us in the work that we do, and it's generally very difficult for us to have access to convene all of you in such a platform. That's why we're so grateful to the Africa Science Media Center for lending us its convening power in bringing you to this press briefing. I'm very, very grateful. I'm hearing somebody saying in the chat they can't hear from me, but I hope others can hear. Can you hear? I
Yes,
hope the rest of you.
Hear you loud and clear.
Okay, all right. So I want to first of all thank Africa Science Media Center for giving me this opportunity of this platform to be able to introduce myself, my organization, and also a campaign that will shape our narratives going forward. I will share a brief PowerPoint presentation and a video and to give you some background. But really, I know some of you may know the Alliance for Science, but I don't want to make an assumption that you all know who we are and what we do. So I'll go back and introduce Alliance for Science. I became the executive director just in June. So it's new for me. I'm just a few months old. It's new for me in the sense that the Alliance for Science is a community that has been growing and it's very robust for the last 8 years. It was started by Dr. Sarah Ivanja, visionary communicator, and I have taken on her mantle, and I am moving Alliance for Science to a slightly broader level. So those of you who may have heard of us, you probably know us as focusing a lot on biotech and very much promoting GMOs, very much promoting gene editing and speaking to the science and promoting understanding of the science. And that is what we do. That is our core business. We are a global science communication initiative. But what I'd like to share with you today is perhaps a broader frame to have the same sorts of conversations, a broader and I would say at this point, a more accessible place of engagement. And so we are launching a campaign called Relief to Resilience, and it's very much speaking to the what for. We're very known for speaking about the science and the value of the science, the integrity of the science, the work of the scientist. But we also now want to say, what is it for? What is the point? And so that's really what this Relief to Resilience campaign is about. And so we will be promoting it over the next few months. You'll see a lot of hashtags. You'll see it in the events that we are participating in. Right now, we're at World Food Prize. Colleagues in our team are having a side event today. Wonderful. These are our colleagues from Asia, and they're talking about the technologies, the genetic GM technologies in rice and the nutrient enriched qualities of the rice from Asia. We also have a brand ambassador from Kenya, Noah Nasiali of A Farmers Media Network. He is going to be speaking on many different platforms, and he will also be speaking about the work he's doing with the Alliance for Science at the World Food Prize. Going forward, we'll be at COP, and then after that, we'll be at Biodiversity COP, and that's just what we're going to do this year. And so this Relief to Resilience campaign will be the frame that we use. But let me just dig right in and introduce ourselves properly once more. I will just share screen. Okay, and I'll go to proper slideshow view. Okay, so here we are. We are the Alliance for Science, and our strapline is Science for Humanity. As I said, we are talking about the what for. What is the science for? It is for ecological resilience, but also social resilience. It's for society. It's for infrastructure. It's for many things. And so what you see here on the left-hand side, you'll see if you look embedded within there are the 17 SDGs. And we've embedded it to show that our work spans the biosphere, spans society, and spans economies for prosperity. So I'll move to the next slide. So today, the focus of my presentation will be about how science and scientific solutions, including GMOs, contribute to resilience in food and nutrition security, climate change, and health. So this is a very broad brush, but we'll go through it quite quickly. Okay. So we work in creating an enabling environment. We work to support the work that researchers do, the scientists. And when their research comes to the public, we work to foster public understanding of what that research is, where the benefits are, the context, and we work to create an enabling environment for the research to now be applied to for solutions, for technologies, for innovations, to be for the uptake of these for the research work. I hope you can hear me. A few people say I'm frozen, but I think check your internet on your side, because sometimes we can't help it. If I'm frozen on your side and not for others, it may be your internet. But please bear with us. These are the challenges of communicating in this digital world, which we're grateful for, but it does have its limitations. And so we also work to create a science enabling environment for policymakers. So as you've seen here in Kenya, there has been a recent removal of the ban on GMOs. And that is a policy shift which has been 10 years in discussion. And you'll see that there have been many voices raised against it. So sometimes when policies come to the public, there has to be a space created for dialogue, for understanding, for sharing views. So we also create that science enabling environment so that when policy shifts are made one way or another, the public can find a space for engagement. It's a little bit of what I'm trying to do here. And then we do straightforward communications and engagement where we are running campaigns because we have a very specific message that we want to share. So this is our vision, just to be clear. The Alliance for Science seeks a future where science and innovation is shared and supported to help bring about a world without poverty, where people everywhere can flourish on an ecologically protected and restored planet. So you'll see elements there where we are looking at the environment, we're looking at economies and people flourishing, looking at a world without poverty, and we're looking. So if you've heard of us, you would have heard of us because of our work in advocacy, we work in communications, and we work in research. We do some research on our own, and mostly that's around science communication, understanding the kinds of communication that's effective and causes behavioral shifts. And also, increasingly, we're doing research into misinformation, looking at the rise of misinformation and how can we bring more fact-based reporting and places where where trusted messengers can share their messages about science, innovation, technology. So we work increasingly more around misinformation. And so we do that to provide, as I said earlier, an enabling environment for science-based solutions to global challenges. So in short, we work positively to impact policy, and we work towards science-informed public. These are the things that we do. And our activities, we have 4 core teams, really. A team that focuses on policy. So we support African and Asian countries that are trying to build up their regulatory framework, their regulatory agencies. So here in Kenya, we've supported for many years the National Biosafety Agency, did that in Ghana, did that in Nigeria, and many other countries, Malawi, Mozambique. We're doing that in Bangladesh. We're working closely with policymakers in Colombia and other countries in Latin America to look at the regulatory and policy framework. And you have to do that somewhat in advance of the research coming onto the market. Because if you don't do that, then you don't have the framework for people to feel safe, for people to trust that their government is taking care of them when they bring innovations which are sometimes controversial, such as GMOs and gene-edited crops onto the market. So we're very, very committed to supporting policy and regulatory and governance frameworks. But we do that with we do that to support the Open Forum for Agricultural Biotechnology, OFAB, which is based in Kenya on the ILRI campus. So they specifically focus on agricultural biotechnology, promoting it, and we support them in policy with a small p, in that we do much more focused work in aspects of the policy work. So when there's a kind of a logjam where public comments are needed, where scientists' voice need to be heard, our policy team works in creating policy briefs, working with scientific communities and others to make sure that they put their voice in so that the policymakers can then get all the comments in and make decisions as to what the country wants to do. We do a lot of training with media, with scientists, and with decision makers. As I said, campaigns. And we also have a growing grassroots network from our global fellows. And this is really where the Alliance for Science started, with fellows network that was trained in Cornell University on science communication. They went into their communities, continued working, and are doing extraordinary work till today across the many regions. So we're building a global network. And what is that network for? As I said earlier, it's looking at the global challenges, of which you can see there are 17 that are embedded here in the global development goals. But let's segment them a bit. You'll see, so as I was saying, life on, the biosphere is the basis of our life on Earth. And so this is where science squarely sits. It's the foundation of life sciences, life on land, life below water, climate action, clean water and sanitation. So these are the SDGs where a lot of scientists are putting in core foundational work that we communicate about a lot. And sitting on top of that, on a healthy planet, is then the work that we do for healthy societies. It's the work that we do to build on what scientists have done in the innovations that they've brought. And we particularly look at agricultural biotechnology. And why? Because we want to support farmers in increasing productivity, in increasing yields, and withstanding the challenges of climate change. So we are working towards a world where no child goes to bed hungry. And we also contribute to the other SDGs, perhaps not as directly as the poverty one, but we do work around quality education, good health, and of course, gender equality, because as you know, our agricultural societies in Africa and in Asia are largely women form 80% of the people working on the land. And on the basis of that, society wants to prosper. And so the SDGs that sit at the top, innovation, work in economies, reduced inequality, sit on top of the work that scientists have been doing in plant scientists. So if you've heard about us, you would have heard about the work that we're doing to promote BT cowpea. We very much celebrated the commercialization of BT cowpea in Nigeria. Cowpea being a fundamental crop for African countries that is more than 50% can be lost due to post-harvest losses because of weevils, pests that bore through the cowpea. So the commercialization of this crop has been a game changer, in fact, literally a game changer. And the actual hybrid variety that is most popular, one of the most popular BT cowpea varieties, is called Game Changer. And it's farmers are looking for it because it's cheaper for them, because in the long run, they are spraying less pesticides. It's less harmful to them in terms of the chemicals to them, the toxicity, because when they're spraying, they tend not to wear a covering. It's less toxic to the soils and their farmland. And it's just cheaper because they're not buying as much fertilizer and other things. Wema, BT Bringle, which is the eggplant, golden rice, which is the rice that they're talking about, our team are talking about at the World Food Prize today. Banana, a lot of work being done on banana, a lot of work being done on cassava varieties, and work on potatoes. So these technologies we've been promoting for a very long time: GMO, precision breeding, gene editing, which is a new aspect of genetic engineering, and which doesn't bring in foreign DNA and seems to be more acceptable to many of the public who are traditionally against GMOs. And the target countries that we have presence in: Ghana, Nigeria, Malawi, Mozambique, and we have presence in some stronger than others, a number through our partner organization, OFAB. We also work in the US, a lot of work in the US, EU and in the UK, because there's an influence either pro or anti on the enabling environment for agricultural technologies that comes from these countries. It's very strong. Now, for those of you who have a strong interest in GMOs, I would actually like to focus a little bit on this particular slide because it's the basis of our communications, the 10 things everyone should know about GMOs in Africa. First, that it is safe. Every scientific body in the world agrees that GMOs are just as safe as non-GMO foods. And this is proven. They're safe to eat, they're safe for livestock, they're safe for humans, and they've been consumed for decades with no significant ill effects that have been documented. So a lot of the fear that is around GMOs is based on misinformation or just a natural sense of reticence, because food has many meanings to people. More than nutrition, food is also culture, it's sometimes religion. And so some of those triggers make it difficult to accept innovations. And we also need to promote and do promote our African scientists that are working in biotech in Africa, in saying that our public scientists, your mothers, fathers, cousins, brothers, sisters that went to scientific institutions to do research, they're the scientists that are working on this technology. It is not necessarily foreign grown imports. The scientists that we promote are African scientists who have defined their work and largely have spent their careers focusing either on a particular crop or in a particular technology across a region. So that's an important point that we need to make. And the fourth point, which is why I got into where I started when I was a research scientist, I started in looking at biological pesticides because of the toxicity of chemical pesticides. We have been looking and are still looking for how to reduce chemical pesticide usage. And so biological pesticides, of which GMOs are one very strong candidate for biological pesticides, reduce the overall use of pesticides. And they're bred to resist pests and diseases. And an important one that many of you will have heard if you live across the East Africa region is the fall armyworm, of course. There's been the potato blight, which has been centuries old. There's always been different potato blights that come on sequentially. So scientists never stop working against the potato blight and the bacteria, the banana bacterial wilt. And so the resistance comes in cycles. And so the scientists have to keep on ahead of what the pests are doing and how, whether they're becoming resistant to the pesticides. So scientists are not stopping day or night. And as I said earlier, they work in collaboration with farmers, and every country has its own sovereign control over GMOs. If it didn't, we wouldn't be talking about GMO bans, and we wouldn't be talking about promoting understanding. To date, there are very few African countries, I think about 5 now, that are actually at commercial usage of GM crops. Some are at field trial stage, others have not even started. And it's a problem because of the growing need for food. We have very low productivity because of rain-fed farming in Africa. We have very low inputs in terms of the quality of our seeds. And without this strong basis of a starting point, we cannot now grow enough food to feed our continent in the long term. And we all know about the burgeoning the growing youth bulge. We all know about the demographics of the continent, and we know that we cannot actually afford to wait for technologies that help raise productivity of food. And then the last few points is that many people say, oh, it's been banned in Europe, so why should we allow GMOs on the continent? Actually, there are 4 European countries where it's not banned, and in the others where there is the bans are not blanket. There may be a ban on some sorts of GM foods or some sort of GM commercialization, but all European countries import GMO livestock feed, and they also import processed foods that have GMO ingredients. And so GM and organic agriculture can exist side by side. And then the big one, which is what the criticism that comes up recurrently, is that when farmers grow GMO seeds, they will not be able to store the seeds because of patent issues, and they won't be able to use them again. And so they're somewhat tied to big corporates. But actually, every country can manage its own GMO seed production using local seeds companies. And some crops are patented, and farmers pay for those seeds just as they pay for hybrid seeds. But increasingly now, especially with those that are grown on the continent, especially by public scientists, they're either free or they're highly subsidized. And they can be saved. Some of them can be saved, and some, of course, can't, just like other hybrid seeds. But in every case, it's about optimizing the effectiveness of the technology from year on year, rather than holding farmers hostage to a particular technology. So when you look at how we speak about it, generally, these are old headlines, but they're still relevant. So we talk about agroecology can sit alongside modern technology, but it will not be enough to feed. It will not be enough for food security in the long run. We simply don't have the quality of inputs. We're simply facing such huge challenges when it comes to climate change that traditional agroecology is not going to be able to meet our needs in the long term. We have to apply modern biotechnology, modern tools to help us in every way to grow our foods. And African women are leading. Many of the scientists that we celebrate are women scientists, and it's really exciting to me that there are African women scientists on the continent doing this world-class work. And so you would have seen some of these headlines when Nigeria commercialized BT cotton as its first GMO crop. Now, of course, we're talking about cowpea. Move on. Yeah, and so these are some of the headlines that our journalists that are part of our network have put on our website and on other media about the work that we do. Then when it comes to health, COVID was a very interesting time when people became very, very interested in science and very knowledgeable to a certain extent. And at the same time, misinformation was rife. And of course, it would be when fear was also rife. Everybody was afraid. The technology that was coming in terms of the vaccines was very new. A lot of explanation was needed. And the uptake of the vaccine was actually a question of life and death. Life and death, not just to the person who decided to take it or not, but also to the communities that were then exposed depending on rates of uptake of the vaccine. So science communication became then very, very serious. We had to really do our best to give people the information to make informed choices, and also to leave space for engagement and dialogue about why there's hesitancy and what could we do about that, so that we could at least get people to a place where they're comfortable about the choices that they're making and understand the risk they're taking one way or another. So I won't go much further. Let me close and give some chance for dialogue, but I need to say the two things that are very important in this, which is, one, we launched a Global South hub in Kenya at the end of August. And we did that for two big reasons. One, because we want to amplify our conversation across the global South. It's very easy to not think about Africa, say, I'm not interested in Africa, I'm interested in Asia, or I'm not interested in Asia, I'm interested in Latin America. But when you discuss the issues, and they're shared issues, they're common issues, when you discuss the issues of food insecurity, of fragile health systems across the global South, you see that there are commonalities. And the global South as a global majority becomes impossible to ignore. So it's a way not only of recognizing the reality of the global South in terms of numbers and importance, but also of amplifying our voice and making a greater constituency come together around shared issues. So the work that we're doing in South America, in Latin America, in Asia and Africa will now coalesce in terms of administratively come through our hub in Nairobi, but also when we go to COP, we will be speaking as the Global South Hub. We will be sharing examples and learning from each other. We will be looking for opportunities to engage with our brothers and sisters and communities across the Global South. And that's our a growing focus. And now to end my presentation, really, we'll talk about relief to resilience where we started. So you see the work that we've been doing historically around biotech, agricultural biotech, sits within this broad frame of relief to resilience. Our fragilities in terms of how we grow our food, how we meet our healthcare needs, how we adapt to climate change, all of those fragilities are only going to increase, but there are solutions. The solutions are all around. They're all around us within the country, they're all around us within the region. So recently I had the privilege of visiting Kajiado County in Kenya. And it was interesting to me because the county minister for agriculture and livestock is an amazing woman called Jackie Cohen. And she's from a Maasai community. And she has been working very hard to support the community to begin to look at how do you now begin to build resilience against climate change? Because right now they're facing a very serious drought, and right now they are receiving food relief. But how do you move a community that traditionally just is used to open grazing? Cattle find food where they can, and when there's no food, they move. And so that has been the tradition for the community. But now, because of the increasing climate events, you have to begin to invest in livestock feed, have to begin to support women to go into dairy farming and all of those things that build in a buffer. Because the thing about being resilient is resilience has three factors. First, you need to have a buffer, because resilience is about having the ability to respond to shocks. So how do you respond to a shock? You're like a ball that has a buffer. You can be hit, but you can bounce back. And what is that buffer? In Kajiado County, the buffer, one of the buffers is around finding livestock feed. Another one, alternative livelihoods that are very closely allied to traditional livelihoods. But in everything, you have to be thinking about what is the buffer when things go wrong, because they will. Climate change is real and the challenge is increasing. And also, the pandemic has taught us that the pandemics may also increase, but also that our inherent health fragilities cannot remain. We need to increase our capacity to manufacture vaccines on our continent. We need to have a health information infrastructure that allows us to communicate quickly and effectively about where the challenges are and to get people to respond. So those are some ways in which we build a buffer. But the second aspect of resilience is you have a buffer, yes, but you also need to have the ability to self-organize. And how do you organize? In some of the communities we're working with in Zambia, we're working with a community that is about 3,500 women that have formed themselves into cooperatives. And the cooperatives are around 30 to 40 women in a particular community growing a particular crop. But they've realized that the sum of the small parts is greater, that if they all come together and support each other in different ways, they can actually enhance their value, which is what they've done. They now actually have a big contract of, I think it's about 6 million from Congo to produce soya oil. And that's from the group of women that have been growing the soya for a while. So how do you support communities to self-organize around systems that build resilience? And then the third thing is learning. How do you support communities to learn from what works, what doesn't work, what opportunities there may be to get ahead of the challenge? So those three things are part of what we'll be communicating: the buffers, the ability to self-organize, and the learning that comes from communities and from science and technology that can be shared. So you'll be seeing a lot more of that as we go along. And so this session is just to brief you around that. And when we share, we hope that you will have enough of a background and feel easy enough to come back to us about anything that's unclear and engage and support us in COP and other events going forward. So that's it from me. Thank you very much. I've spoken for a long time. Thank you.